You do not need 1,000 techniques. You do not need 100 affirmations. You do not need 50 visualizations, 40 journaling prompts, 30 subliminal audios, 20 crystals, 10 teachers, or a single new course. You need 5 assumptions. 5. That is the entire architecture. Once these 5 assumptions are installed in your nervous system at the level of felt knowing, every other technique becomes optional. Most people fail at manifestation, not because they lack methods, but because they have collected too many methods on top of an unstable foundation. The foundation is the assumption. The assumption is what your nervous system actually believes about how reality works. Without the right 5 assumptions running underneath, every technique you layer on top is wasted effort. With the right 5 assumptions running underneath, you can manifest almost anything with very little technique at all, because the assumptions themselves do most of the work. Neville Goddard spent his entire life trying to teach this, and the manifestation industry has spent the last 50 years burying it under noise. Today we strip it back to the bone. 5 assumptions, nothing else. If you internalize these 5, the rest of the work becomes mechanical. The first thing you need to accept is that an assumption is not a thought. An assumption is not something you say to yourself in front of a mirror. An assumption is the unspoken background of how your nervous system relates to reality. It is the layer underneath thinking. It is what you take for granted as the way things are. Most of your current assumptions about money, about success, about how the universe responds to you, are not things you have ever consciously chosen. They were absorbed from family, from culture, from the early years of your life when your nervous system was forming its default predictions. You never agreed to them. They were installed. And every result you have today is a precise expression of those installed assumptions. To change the results, you do not change the techniques, you change the assumptions. Once the assumptions change, the techniques that match them rise naturally, and the results follow without strain. The 5 assumptions are not affirmations. Affirmations are sentences. These are postures, they are stances, they are configurations of your inner relationship to reality. You do not repeat them, you inhabit them. The repetition belongs to people who do not yet inhabit, and once they inhabit, they no longer need to repeat. We will go through all 5 in clinical detail. After we are done, you will know exactly what is missing from your current manifestation practice and exactly what to install instead. Assumption 1, I am the operant power. This is the assumption Neville said was the foundation of the entire law. The operant power is the active force, the thing that is doing. Most people, when they begin manifestation work, secretly assume that the universe is the operant power. They are the requester. The universe is the dispenser. They submit a request. The universe decides whether to fulfill it. This assumption is hidden. They do not say it out loud. They might even publicly claim the opposite. But underneath, in the body, they are in the position of asking. The body language of asking is unmistakable. Slight tension in the shoulders, a subtle plead in the voice when they speak about their desires, a constant looking outward for signs, a nervous checking of whether the universe has responded. This is the body language of someone who has not assumed they are the operant power. They are still hoping the operant power is elsewhere. The first assumption requires a complete inversion. You are the operant power. You are not asking, you are not requesting, you are not submitting, you are not hoping. You are the one doing. Your assumption is the active force. Your imagination is what shapes reality. There is no universe out there separately deciding whether you deserve what you want. There is only your consciousness, which is what the word universe actually means when traced back to its roots, and your consciousness is doing what you assume. If you assume scarcity, scarcity is being done. If you assume abundance, abundance is being done. The verb is yours, the subject is you, the object is the entire 3D world you see around you. You are not a small character inside someone else's movie waiting for the director to throw you a bone. You are the consciousness, writing the script in real time. The 3D is the projection of the script. People react to this assumption in 2 ways. Most react by intellectually agreeing and bodily refusing. They say, yes, of course, I am the operant power. And then they immediately go back to checking the bank account to see if the universe has paid them yet. The body does not believe what the mouth has said. The body still believes the universe is in charge. To install this assumption truly, you must catch yourself dozens of times a day in the act of waiting for the universe to do something. Every time you catch yourself waiting, You gently remind the body, no, the operant power is here, not out there. The waiting itself is the wrong posture. The waiting confirms the universe is in charge. Stop waiting. Begin assuming. The 3D will reorganize around the new posture as soon as the body actually adopts it. The body adoption takes weeks, not minutes. Be patient with the body. The body is the part that matters. The second reaction to this assumption is fear. Some people, the moment they truly understand that they are the operant power, get scared. Because if they are the operant power, then every result they currently have is their responsibility. The broke financial situation, the exhausting job, the strained relationships, the health issues, all of it. They are the operant power, and the operant power has been operating. The results are the operating. This is uncomfortable. Most people would rather blame the universe, the system, the parents, the timing, the bosses, the partners, anything external. As long as something else is the operant power, they are off the hook. But this also means they have no power to change anything. The price of denying the operant power is permanent powerlessness. The price of accepting it is permanent responsibility in exchange for permanent capability. Choose. You cannot have both safety and power. You can have one or the other. The first assumption requires choosing power. Assumption 2. It is already done. The wish fulfilled. The end is here. This is the assumption that most violates the modern mind's relationship with time. The modern mind believes in sequence. First you want something, then you try to get it. Then, if you are lucky and skilled, you eventually have it. Past, present, future. Linear, predictable. The second assumption breaks this sequence entirely. It assumes that the end exists right now, not in the future, not after the work is done, not when the universe decides to deliver, right now. The thing you want is already real, in the dimension where your assumptions live, and your work is simply to occupy that dimension long enough that the 3D, which is downstream of the assumption layer, catches up and reflects it. Neville called this living in the end. He did not mean visualizing the end while still feeling like you do not have it. He meant occupying the end as if it has already arrived, with all of the felt consequences of that arrival, while your bank account still says the opposite, while your inbox still looks empty, while your circumstances have not yet visibly changed. The assumption is that those visible things are simply the printer running an old file. The new file is already written in the assumption layer. The printer will catch up. Your only job is to keep occupying the end so consistently that the body believes it is already true regardless of what the eyes see. This is the assumption that most directly contradicts the hopeful beggar state, which is the state most modern manifestors are stuck in. The hopeful beggar assumes the wish is not yet fulfilled and asks the universe to fulfill it. The second assumption assumes the wish is already fulfilled and asks nothing. There is no asking, there is no waiting, there is no hoping. There is only occupation of the end as a current felt reality. The difference between these two postures is the difference between manifesting and just suffering elaborately. The hopeful beggar will spend 20 years in the practice and produce almost nothing. The person who installs the second assumption will produce visible results within months because the printer cannot help itself once the new file is held consistently in the assumption layer. How do you actually occupy the end? Pick the moment after the desire has been fulfilled, not the moment of receiving, the moment after. The boring afternoon 3 weeks after the wish has come true, when the new reality has already settled into normalcy. The check has cleared, the deposit is in, the relationship is established, the career has shifted, the home has been purchased, the body has healed. Whatever the wish is, find the moment 3 weeks after the moment of arrival. That moment has a very specific quality. It is calm. It is settled. There is no celebration in it. There is no relief in it. It is the felt reality of someone who simply has the thing as their normal life. Occupy that moment. Spend 10 minutes a day inside it, not visualizing it, not narrating it to yourself, being in it, as if you had teleported into that afternoon and were simply experiencing the body of the person you are by then. The boredom of normalcy, the calm of having, the slight amusement at what used to feel impossible. That is the end. Live in the end. The 3D will reorganize to match the end you are living in. This is the entire mechanism. There is no other. Assumption 3. The 3D will obey on its own schedule, not on mine. This is the assumption that protects you from the most common failure mode in manifestation work. The failure mode is impatience disguised as faith. People assume the end briefly and then immediately start trying to control the timing. They want it by Friday. They want it before the bills are due. They want it before the family Christmas dinner so they can have something to report. They want it to be visible soon on their schedule. This assumption, even when held only subtly, contaminates the entire practice, because the assumption that you can dictate the timing implies that the 3D has not yet delivered, which contradicts assumption 2 that it is already done. The two assumptions clash, and the more recent assumption that you need it by a specific date wins, and the practice fails. The third assumption requires releasing the schedule entirely, not because you do not care when it arrives. You can care, you can have preferences, but you must release the bodily insistence on a specific timeline. The 3D is the printer. The printer has its own queue. The queue contains all of the previous assumptions you have been holding, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. Those old assumptions are still printing. They will continue to print even after you change the file for some amount of time until the queue clears. The clearance time varies. For some desires, the queue is short and the new reality appears in weeks. For others, the queue is long, and the new reality takes months or even years. You cannot know in advance, you do not need to know. You only need to keep occupying the end and let the 3D handle its own scheduling. This assumption produces a strange peace once installed. The peace of someone who knows it is done and does not need to verify when. The peace of someone who has placed an order with a vendor they trust and does not need to call every day to ask if the order has shipped. The vendor will ship. The package will arrive. Calling every day will not make it ship faster and will only annoy the vendor and exhaust the caller. The hopeful beggar state is the state of someone calling the vendor every day. The third assumption is the state of someone who placed the order, hung up the phone and forgot about it, knowing the package will arrive in its own time. The forgetting is part of the assumption. The forgetting is what proves the assumption is real. As long as you are tracking, you are still asking. The day you actually forget is the day the 3D begins to move quickly. This does not mean you do not care about the thing. You can care deeply. But the caring lies in the assumption that it is already done, not in the anxiety of when. The two feelings are completely different in the body. Anxiety of timing feels tight. Calm of done feels open. You can tell which one you're in by checking your body. If the body is tight when you think about the desire, the third assumption is not installed. If the body is open when you think about the desire, the third assumption is operating. Build the habit of checking your body every time the desire comes to mind. Every check is a chance to gently release the tightness and return to the open state. Over weeks, the body learns the new posture, and the third assumption installs itself naturally. Before we move into the last two assumptions, drop a comment. Tell me which of the first three you have been violating most. Was it the operant power? Assuming the universe was in charge instead of you? Was it living in the end, still feeling like the wish was unfulfilled? Was it the timing, demanding the 3D obey your schedule? Be honest. The honesty is the practice. The pinned comment has the next step for the ones who are ready to actually rewrite these assumptions in their nervous system. I read every comment, and I can tell which ones are going to produce real results and which ones are still performing for the audience. Be the ones who tell the truth. Assumption 4. My feeling is my reality. This is the assumption that closes the loop between imagination and 3D. Without this assumption, the previous three sit on the surface and do not penetrate. With this assumption, every imaginal act becomes a real act of creation, because the feeling generated by the act is what the nervous system records as reality. The body does not distinguish between an external event and an internal event of equal felt intensity. The body responds to feeling, not to fact. If you can generate the feeling of having received the money, the body responds as if the money has been received. The nervous system updates its predictive model. The brain begins to produce the behaviors of someone who has the money, and the 3D, which is downstream of the behaviors, reorganizes around the new state. This assumption is what makes manifestation work different from simple positive thinking. Positive thinking happens in the cortex. It does not change the body. It does not change the predictive model. It does not change the behavior. The wish remains unfulfilled because the body never received the signal that anything was different. The assumption that feeling is reality is what moves the work down from the cortex into the body. Once it is in the body, everything else follows automatically. The behaviors change, the decisions change, the energy you bring into rooms changes, the kind of opportunities you notice changes, the kind of people who respond to you changes. All of this happens because the body now believes a new reality, and the body is what runs the show. Practically, this assumption requires that you take the inner feeling of having the thing as more real than the outer evidence of not having the thing. This is hard. The outer evidence is loud, the bank balance is right there in numbers, the empty inbox is right there on the screen. The disappointing situation is right there in your face. The inner feeling, by comparison, is quiet, subjective, easy to dismiss. The fourth assumption requires you to weight the quiet inner feeling as more real than the loud outer evidence. This sounds insane to the analytical mind, and it would be insane if not for one fact. The inner feeling produces the outer evidence on a delay. The outer evidence is downstream. The inner feeling is upstream. The wise practitioner privileges the upstream over the downstream, because the upstream is what shapes the downstream. The fool privileges the downstream and tries to fight the upstream by yelling at the outer evidence to change. The outer evidence cannot change while the inner feeling stays the same. The fool will never understand this and will spend their life trying to fix the printout while ignoring the file. This assumption is most easily installed through the drowsy state right before sleep. In that state, the analytical mind is offline. The body is open. The feeling you generate at that moment is treated by the nervous system as fact. Spend 5 minutes every night in the felt reality of having received what you want. Do not visualize the receiving. Visualize the calm afternoon after. Generate the body sensation of someone who already has it. The chest soft, the breath easy, a small smile at the corners of the mouth, the slight boredom of normalcy. Stay there for 5 minutes. Then sleep. Your nervous system will spend the entire night assuming that feeling is your reality and will begin to construct the next day the behaviors of someone who lives in that reality. Do this every night for 90 days, and the predictive model of your nervous system will have substantially migrated. Do this every night for 6 months, and your daytime experience will be functionally unrecognizable from where it is today. Assumption 5. I do not need to know how. This is the assumption that releases the practitioner from the trap of mechanism. The trap of mechanism is the assumption that you have to figure out in advance the specific path by which the desire will be fulfilled. People in this trap spend enormous amounts of energy trying to predict the channel. Will the money come from a new client? Will it come from a windfall? Will it come from a job offer? Will it come from an investment? They sit in worry, trying to engineer the path in their head, because they cannot accept that the path does not need to be known in order for the result to arrive. The fifth assumption requires complete release of the how. You assume the result. You do not assume the path. The path is not your job. The path is the 3D's job. The 3D will produce the path that matches the assumed result. Sometimes the path will look obvious in hindsight. Sometimes it will look completely improbable in hindsight. The path is invisible until it appears. Demanding to know it in advance is like demanding to know which roads a delivery driver will take to your house before you place the order. You do not need to know. You only need to place the order and let the driver choose the route. The driver knows roads you do not know. The driver knows shortcuts you have not heard of. The driver will arrive. Your job is to receive the package. This assumption is the one that most threatens the educated, analytical, strategic mind. The strategic mind wants to plan. It wants to optimize. It wants to control. The fifth assumption requires the strategic mind to stand down on the question of how. The strategic mind can still operate on the daily tasks in front of you, the work that needs to be done, the calls that need to be made, the responsibilities that need to be honored. But the strategic mind does not get to decide the mechanism of fulfillment. That belongs to the 3D, which has far more information than your strategic mind has, and can construct paths that you could never have predicted. Releasing the how is not laziness. It is a higher form of strategy. It frees up the energy that was being burned in worry about the path and redirects that energy into the felt occupation of the end, which is what actually produces the result. People with this assumption installed often report that the path of fulfillment was completely unexpected. They were planning to get the money from one source, and it came from another. They were expecting the opportunity to arrive through one channel, and it arrived through a stranger they had never met. They were preparing for the relationship to develop in one way, and it developed in a way they had never considered. This is the signature of the fifth assumption working correctly. The path is surprising. The result is exact. The body learns to trust the surprise. After a few experiences of this, the body becomes calm about not knowing how. The not knowing becomes part of the practice, and the results become more frequent, larger and easier, because the practitioner is no longer burning energy on engineering paths that the 3D was going to engineer anyway. These are the 5 assumptions. I am the operant power. It is already done. The 3D will obey on its own schedule. My feeling is my reality. I do not need to know how. 5 postures, each one a complete inner stance toward reality. Each one, when installed in the body, eliminates an entire category of failure that traps almost everyone else. Together, they form the entire foundation of manifestation. Every Neville technique you have ever read is a derivative of these 5. Every modern manifestation method that actually works is a derivative of these 5. Every method that does not work is missing at least one of them. Most people fail at manifestation because they have installed maybe 1 or 2 of the 5 partially, on the surface, intellectually, but not in the body. They have read about them. They can describe them. They have nodded along when teachers explained them, but they have not occupied any of them as a true bodily stance. The occupation is the work. Reading is not occupation. Understanding is not occupation. Occupation is when the assumption has become your default body posture, when you no longer have to remember to be in it, when it runs by itself, when it survives pressure, when it does not collapse, the moment the 3D resists. The path to installing the 5 is the same as the path to installing any nervous system change. Daily, calm, repeated occupation in a relaxed body, especially in the drowsy state before sleep. Each assumption can be installed in roughly 30 to 60 days of consistent occupation. The full 5 can be installed in 6 to 12 months. Once the 5 are installed, your manifestation practice becomes radically simpler. You do not need 1,000 techniques. You do not need to switch frameworks every 6 weeks. You do not need new gurus, new methods, new courses. The 5 are doing the work automatically underneath everything you do. You become, in the truest sense, the operant power, and the 3D arranges itself accordingly. Notice that none of the 5 require belief in a specific spiritual framework. None of them require religion. None of them require a particular metaphysics. They are descriptions of how consciousness produces reality, regardless of what you call the producer. You can be agnostic and install all 5. You can be religious and install all 5. You can be a hardcore materialist and, if you are intellectually honest, recognize that the 5 are descriptions of how the predictive nervous system constructs experience, which is increasingly supported by modern neuroscience anyway. The 5 do not depend on your beliefs about the universe. The 5 depend only on whether you actually install them in your body. Tell me in the comments which of the 5 you are weakest on. Be brutally honest. Which assumption is the one your body refuses to hold? The operant power, where you keep slipping into asking the universe. The already done, where you keep slipping into waiting. The schedule, where you keep demanding a specific timeline. The feeling is reality, where you keep privileging the outer evidence. The not needing to know how, where you keep trying to engineer the path. The weakest one is the leverage point. Install that one first and everything else accelerates. The pinned comment has the next step for the ones who want to begin the installation tonight, not next week, not after another video, not after one more book. Tonight, in the 5 minutes before sleep, where the work actually happens. The 5 assumptions are not a curriculum. They are an inheritance. They are what every truly wealthy, truly fulfilled, truly free person has installed, often without knowing they have installed them, because they were lucky enough to absorb them from their environment. You were not lucky enough. Most of us were not. So we install them deliberately. We do the work the lucky ones never had to do, and the result is the same. The state arrives. The 3D obeys. The reality you wanted becomes the reality you live inside, not in some distant future, in the months and years immediately ahead. 6 months from today, if you install the 5 with discipline, the version of you reading this will not recognize the financial reality of the version of you writing this in the comments tonight. That is the work. That is the path. 5 assumptions. Nothing else. Everything else is decoration. Drop the decoration. Pick up the 5. Let them do what they do. The 3D has been waiting for you to assume correctly. Begin tonight. The printer is already lined up to print the new file. All it needs is for you to actually hold the file long enough for the queue to clear. Hold it. The rest will happen on its own. There is one thing left to address before we close, and it is the question every serious practitioner eventually asks. What do you do when the body refuses to install an assumption? You sit down to occupy the end, and the body fights back. You try to feel the wish fulfilled, and the body floods you with doubt. You try to assume you are the operant power, and the body whispers that you are not, that you cannot be, that you are the same broke person you have always been. This resistance is not failure. This resistance is the previous assumption defending itself. The previous assumption was installed for a reason. It was protecting you from something. Maybe from disappointment, maybe from social rejection, maybe from the fear of being responsible for your own results. The previous assumption is not your enemy. It is an old protection that has outlived its usefulness. Treat it gently. Acknowledge that it is trying to help, then quietly proceed with the new assumption anyway. The body cannot hold two contradictory assumptions forever. Eventually, it will let the old one go, especially if you are consistent and calm in your occupation of the new one. The work is in not getting into a fight with the old assumption. Fights energize the old assumption. Quiet replacement starves it. Choose replacement, not war. Another thing to remember, the 5 assumptions are not always installed in order. Some people install 3 and 4 easily, but struggle for years with 1. Others install 1 and 2 quickly but cannot release the how. Each person has their own resistance profile based on their history. The assumption that you find hardest to install is usually the one connected to the deepest wound. The strategist, who cannot release the how, often has a childhood story about being safe only when controlling outcomes. The seeker, who cannot live in the end, often has a story about not being allowed to claim good things before they have been earned. The asker, who cannot inhabit the operant power, often has a story about authority being elsewhere, parents, gods, governments, never themselves. The wounds are not obstacles to the work. The wounds are the entry points to the work. The assumption you struggle most with is showing you exactly where your deepest healing lives. Treat the struggle as a gift. The struggle is pointing at the door. Finally, do not underestimate how quickly your entire life can rearrange once the 5 are running together. People who install all 5 report that the speed of their manifestation accelerates exponentially after about 90 days. The first 90 are slow because the body is still learning. The next 90 are faster. The third 90 are unrecognizable because the assumptions are now running automatically, and the 3D has had enough time to catch up to the new state. 6 months. That is the rough timeline. Some go faster, some slower. Almost everyone who installs the 5 with real discipline reports that the financial and life results of the second year of practice make the entire first year of practice look quaint by comparison. The compounding is real. The momentum builds. The state stabilizes. The 3D becomes responsive in ways that used to seem impossible. None of this is mystical. All of it is the natural mechanical outcome of installing the 5 correctly in a nervous system that was previously running on the wrong defaults. So tonight, in the 5 minutes before sleep, pick the weakest of the 5, whichever one you wrote in the comments. Begin the occupation. Do not strain, do not perform, do not repeat words. Just gently take the posture of the assumption as if it were already your default. Feel what it would feel like in the body. Stay there as long as the body holds it. When it slips, gently return. That is the entire practice. 5 minutes a night. The drowsy state takes care of the rest. In 30 to 60 days, the assumption begins to install. In 90 days, it stabilizes. In 6 months, the full 5 are running and your life rearranges around them. That is the work. That is the path. There is no other.